This is Saturn Girl. Like this video and subscribe to my channel. Comment below because I want to know what you think. And it helps me out with the algorithm. Also, do me a favor and click the bell when you subscribe so that you get notified when my new videos drop. And my videos are the best. Well, anyway, what's crackin'? This is a very special video for me. You see, we're going to be talking about a transit that I've been anticipating since I was 22 years old. That's 18 years. Who has time for that? Oh my God. What kind of suspenseful movie? I mean, what is this, Lord of the Rings? Anyway, Saturn Girl is supposed to be patient, but I hate being patient. I want an Oompa Loompa now, Daddy. Hey, universe, don't make me speak to your manager, okay? So what am I talking about? I'm talking about Pluto entering Aquarius, yes? You see, this is a big deal to me, and I've been researching it for years. Why? Because I'm Aquarius rising. 1 degree Aquarius rising. That means Pluto is going to cross my ascendant 5 times over the next few years. So please pardon me if I seem a bit nervous, okay? Because, when Pluto crossed the ascendant of famous French revolutionary Maximilien Robespierre, he lost his head, didn't he? But this transit has far-reaching implications for us collectively as well, not just individually. Pluto in Aquarius has inaugurated massive upheavals and sweeping changes in society and power relations throughout human history. We're going to look at a few of these events and talk about the meaning of Pluto entering Aquarius. We'll also talk briefly about what this means for you individually and do some horoscopes. Your favorite things, right? Everyone wants horoscopes. What does this mean to me? What have you done for me lately? Anyway, this is especially significant if you have a fixed rising sign, and even more so if Pluto will aspect your ascendant degree, by a square, an opposition. I suppose a trine is interesting too, but the angular things are especially interesting to me. So anyway, first of all, what does Pluto even mean in astrology? Well, Pluto was the Greek god of the underworld. And you may be thinking, well, what about Hades? Well, it's a funny story, isn't it? I mean, it's more boring than funny, but let me tell you anyway. You see, over time, the name Hades became more associated with the place, yes, and the name Pluto started to become more associated with the god of the place, right? Plus, there was another Greek god named Plutus. Now, Plutus was considered the personification of wealth, according to Wikipedia. He also ruled buried treasure and precious items hidden below the earth. He also came to be associated with power and corruption because, well, that's what wealth does, right? Elon Musk, excuse me. I have the Musk cough. Pardon me. Hence, Pluto and Plutus were conflated together in a mutual set of significations, sort of like the syncretism between Thoth and Hermes. Now, I have a lot of problems with the theosophical line of teaching, but I do use a lot of the Pluto significations found in the Alice Bailey books, particularly esoteric astrology. But many of the themes that we find in there are still consistent with the Greek mythology. Number one, will and power. Yes? And that spans the entire spectrum, the good and the bad. For example, we'll see people who challenge power, yes, but also people who, abuse it. We see things like dominance, submission, and control. Along with that, we can see what? Manipulation. And we see this come up in the modern psychological context with concepts like gaslighting, love bombing, and mental abuse. We also see wealth and hoarding, right? Think of Plutus. It's sort of like Ebenezer Scrooge, right? Bah, humbug. The United States has Pluto in the second house, which is sort of similar energy, hoarding. I think of the prevailing refrain from American conservatives saying, "That's my money. It's mine. It's my money," right? And then they collect Social Security. So I also think of ownership, right? And again, think of the US or ownership, right, of people in the past, right? We don't do that anymore, but that was a dark spot in American history. You could even call the United States a plutocracy, which essentially means that you get political influence by being wealthy, right? The more money you have, the more influence you have, right? Can call up the president, be like, "Yo, president, I don't like this billionaire tax you got in mind there. Squash that." Now we also see what? The elephant in the room. Transformation, right? That's the big one everyone talks about. And everyone talks about transformation, of course, but what they really mean is life-shattering crisis. Because how do you transform, right? We see this theme reflected even in the ancient Greek tradition with Plutus, right? Since he rules precious gems and minerals found, right, under the earth. And how do we make a diamond, my loves? Through heat and pressure. Sort of like working in restaurants, right? For all my service industry friends, I did that for many years. Seriously though, Pluto does bring crises. In fact, you can look at what house Pluto occupies in your chart to get a hint of where you're shattered in life. Now, we also see things like trauma and mental illness, which are a bit more contemporary significations. The movie American Psycho automatically comes to mind, Sorry. But Pluto was discovered in 1930, just following Sigmund Freud's work on the ego and the id. You see, the id is like the inner beast, like me then feed me, F me then feed me, right? I don't know if you know that song, but it's a really good song. But just as Pluto ruled the underworld, so does he likewise rule our personal underworld. I'm talking about the things that we hide from ourselves, pain from the past, the things we could not forget, right? And we wish we could. Pluto brings up hidden hurts. He's also there when we avoid these hurts, yes? But what about Aquarius? Let's talk about Aquarius. I mean, again, right? I'm Aqua rising. I should know a few things about Aquarius. Aquarius, right? Aquarius. Well, you know from following me that the signs primarily get their meanings from the planets that rule them and their place in the solar cycle. Aquarius is ruled by who? Saturn. Yes, not Uranus, not mine, but Saturn. Saturn is cold and dry, and Aquarius is known for its coldness and being sort of removed or emotionally aloof. Yes, there's a distance between the Aquarian and everyone else. Yeah. Saturn rules outcasts, and Aquarius is known for being strange and unusual, just like Winona Ryder in Beetlejuice. I am the strange and unusual. I mean, I am. Just spend a little time with me and you'll find out. Saturn was also the furthest visible object and was seen as opposing the sun's rule and authority, right? The sun rules authority. So he's also associated with rebellion and those who challenge authority. Before Uranus was the revolutionary, it was Saturn. In fact, all the outer planets stole their significations from Saturn. Saturn was the revolutionary, not Uranus. Saturn was the deceiver, not Neptune. Saturn was power and death, not Pluto, right? But they needed signification, so they took him from Saturn because he's so giving. My father is so giving. Anyway, Aquarius is also the first sign after the winter solstice, when the sun's light begins to wax, and when the days begin to grow longer, in anticipation of spring, the rebirth, the vernal equinox. Yes. In that way, Aquarius is forward-looking into the future, yes, and future possibilities. We say forward-thinking. Capricorn, though, is like Saturn turned inward, while Aquarius is like Saturn turned outward. As astrologer Austin Coppock once said, Capricorn is Saturn in the box, while Aquarius is Saturn out of the box. Yes, I do love boxes. Anyway, now Pluto has an interesting and tumultuous history. He has an orbital period of 248 years. So this is the first time we're seeing Pluto re-enter Aquarius since 1778, during the American Revolution. You see, I've looked at past events that occur while Pluto is in Aquarius, and we tend to see a consistent theme: upheavals and power. While Pluto transits Aquarius, we typically see the established order turned on its head. While as Pluto transits the previous sign, Capricorn, the underlying sickness of the structure gets exposed. Discontent increases and approaches a climax. Then we often have a violent conflict between established power and a rising power. We also see the conflict of the dying yet established economic system and one growing that challenges it. Yes. We've had many examples of this. We've had many examples of this throughout history. Our current established order has revolved around capitalism and the power of finance capital. Part of that power structure has been class power, or influence that's based on wealth, right? Another part of it has been racial relations, right? And racism. Another facet of it has been patriarchy, or gender relations as well. You see, activists challenged each one of these while Pluto transited Capricorn, didn't they? For example, we had the Occupy movement, where we popularized the slogan, "We are the 99%, right? And then we became more aware of the 1% and the disparity in wealth, right? More and more people realized how destructive economic inequality could be. Well, then we had the Black Lives Matter movement take off after the riots in Ferguson, Missouri, right? Which were in response to brutal police killings of young black men. Then we had the Me Too movement emerge, yes? Exposing sexual predators and violence against women. We've also had some really notable whistleblowers come up. We had Julian Assange of WikiLeaks, right? And he helped expose the horrors of the illegal war in Iraq. One of my heroes, right, was a participant in that, Chelsea Manning. Yes, very, very wonderful person, in my opinion. We also had Edward Snowden exposing some of the inner workings of the surveillance state. Now, FDR once famously said that we wouldn't have to worry about fascism as long as democracy delivered on its promises. However, the economic system has not been delivering on its promises. But how did we get here? Well, Before capitalism and wealth, what was the dominant power structure? It was monarchies. It was kings. Yes. Pluto entered Aquarius in 1778 during the American Revolution, which challenged the power of the British crown. They used to say the sun never set on the British Empire, right? I think they said that more recently, probably World War I or something like that. But Pluto was in Capricorn in the 1760s and 70s, right? During that time, the weaknesses of the British monarchy became very clear. And really, in monarchies in general, as we saw a rising merchant class begin to challenge it. You see, they begin to amass wealth that rivals that of monarchies. In 1776, economist Adam Smith released the first gospel of capitalism, right? His famous book called The Wealth of Nations, which outlined ideas, yes, of the new economic system that challenged the traditional social order. Before the American Revolution, power mostly came from your station in life. First was the monarchy, then was the nobility and the clergy, then was the merchant class, who were called in France the Third Estate. In fact, I think they lumped all the laboring classes in there too. You see, they didn't have any political influence, and they finally said, screw that! I got more money than the king. You know? Now, what other famous revolution did Pluto and Aquarius bring? The French Revolution, which challenged absolutely everything about society, even down to the calendar and the way we tell time, if I'm not mistaken. Again, Maximilien Robespierre, who I mentioned earlier, is one of the most famous and infamous characters of this revolution because he presided over the execution of approximately 17,000 people with the guillotine. He was also an Aquarius rising like me. And when Pluto crossed his ascendant, as I mentioned earlier, he literally lost his head. Again to the guillotine, after using it so often. I mean, he didn't do it himself. Other people do it. Anyway, before that, what was the power structure? Well, before monarchies, power ultimately rested with the Pope, the religious leader of Western Europe. You see, Pluto entered Capricorn in 1512, when the famous theologian Martin Luther published his 95 Theses in what's now Germany. He was accusing the Catholic Church and the church hierarchy of corruption. You used to be able to buy your way into heaven. It was called indulgences. You just pay money and they give you a piece of paper. It says, here's your ticket to heaven. Hand this to St. Peter when you pass, right? Don't forget to take your ticket. Anyway, you see, this ushered in the struggle of the Reformation between the supremacy of the Pope and the growing Protestant movement. But then you see the Pope's supremacy was effectively usurped or taken away when King Henry VIII declared himself the head of his own Church of England in 1534, after Pluto had just gone into Aquarius, you see. The Pope tried to excommunicate King Henry over his divorce from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Henry responded by giving him the finger, right? I'm not going to actually do it, but you know what the finger is. And starting his own church. The Pope no longer had supreme power over Western European monarchies. Now, before that, the struggle was between the Eastern and Western churches, right? Because we know that as the Roman Empire fell in the West, the East started to flourish, right? And was more powerful. Now, this struggle between the East and the West, right, between the Byzantines and the Romans, right, who became the Roman Catholic Church under the leadership of the Pope, who was previously called the Bishop of Rome. So again, there are many reasons for this bitter rivalry, excuse me, between the Eastern Byzantine Empire and the Western Roman Empire, which followed, right, the fall of Western Rome around, I think it was 450 CE. It used to be that the emperor, right, the Roman emperor, would come from the Byzantines, and the Pope would come from the Western or Roman Church, right? But the Pope had to approve the emperor, yes. Now, while Pluto was in Capricorn, a woman named Irene of Athens became emperor regent when her husband passed. She was effectively the most powerful woman the world had ever seen. Really, one of the most powerful people in the world. But when Pluto entered Capricorn, rather, her son challenged her authority, and she had his eyes gouged out, unfortunately. Or that may have been when Pluto went into Aquarius, pardon me. Now the Pope then, in response, refused to recognize a woman emperor. So he just declared his filthy little protege, Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Emperor, effectively starting a new empire, right? Just in order to not let a woman be a leader, essentially. And this effectively usurped the power from the Byzantines. We don't realize how momentous this was in retrospect, but it led to everything else that followed later in Western Europe. The power relations of the entire Western world were hence turned on their heads. But even when Pluto went into Aquarius in 1161 BCE, right? I'm talking about way, way, way long ago. Yes, I'm talking about 3,000 years ago, right? This was around the time of the late Bronze Age collapse, which was one of the most pivotal events in human history. You see, the power structure of ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Levant, right, which is now Israel, Palestine, and Lebanon, the Levant and all these places remained relatively stable politically for thousands of years. There was all kinds of brutal wars back and forth, but for the most part, the arrangement was consistent. Now that structure came crashing down with the mass and violent invasion of people from the Western Mediterranean known as the Sea Peoples, right? Makes me think of sea monkeys, right? It's like we put them in water and we watch them grow, but these people were not as nice as sea monkeys. We have records from both Egypt and the Levant detailing the mass carnage. So you can see why I'm a bit anxious that Pluto's going back into Aquarius again. History has shown us how violent and destabilizing these transfers of power can be. It's like all the reactionary forces are now arrayed against progress and a more inclusive society. Well, so what will happen? It's anyone's guess. But as a student of history and an astrologer, I have a few ideas. First, I'll just lay it straight. I see political violence and upheaval. But what does that look like? Well, number one, Western support for Israel is on the decline now. And countries like the US are further isolating themselves from the international community. We have the UN now presiding over a genocide trial. I don't think I can say that word, but you know what I mean. The G word. Genocide. This to me looks like the decline of the United States too, as the global superpower. And as the most powerful country in the United Nations. Now this will take a while to precipitate, but we can already see the outlines of it. Fascism is also on the rise. Yes. Especially in Western Europe, and especially in Italy and Germany. Once again, same players with a different sort of attitude in a way. And we see it emerging in the United States with Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. Aquarius also rules technology, and Pluto rules power. So I also anticipate the widespread use of technology as a mechanism for control. And this is what Edward Snowden was on about, right? Corporations and financial interests will be trying their damnedest to maintain power. And quite frankly, they want to know all of our purchasing history. They want to know all of our actions. They want to know everything we do so that they can turn it into algorithms to sell us more bullshit. But on a positive note, right? On a positive note, we know that capitalism isn't delivering on its promises, but democracy can. It just depends on who it's working for, right? I think we will start to see a transformation of the economic structure by necessity because people can't even afford to make ends meet anymore. Aquarius rules the masses, as well as the destitute and the oppressed, because they are children of Saturn. So sometime over the next 20 years, I think we'll see power and wealth necessarily become less concentrated. And liberation movements will get added strength and power. For example, look at the rise of the labor movement in the United States. We just had the first United Auto Workers strike that hit all big three car manufacturers. That's amazing. This is so momentous. The president of the UAW, the United Auto Workers, is a man who I think is so dreamy, named Shawn Fain. And to me, he represents the Aquarian spirit, even though he's a Scorpio, right? They've been talking about arranging a general strike for 2028 across multiple industries, you see. Now, he also has Mars exactly conjunct Pluto in his birth chart, so he's a fighter, you know. I think he's probably an Aquarius rising, but we don't know his birth time, so, you know. Now, Aquarius also rules the blood, like Leo rules the heart, and hence has to do with how resources are distributed, you see. Hopefully we see that done more equitably and efficiently. But what does this have to do with you? Well, number one, it'll affect the environment in which you live. This will be the general backdrop of our lives for the next 20 years. Now, during difficult times in history, people still had to go to work, make money, take care of their kids, put food on the table. In order to see how this transit will affect you personally, though, we'll need to see what house Pluto will be entering in your chart. That means we're going to have to do some very brief and general horoscopes. Now remember, this transit lasts for 20 years, so we can only give a general outline. If you have a fixed rising sign, though, that is Taurus, Leo, Aquarius, and Scorpio, this will be especially transformative for you. But essentially, wherever Pluto is in your chart is where you get shattered, you see. This goes for both transit and natal. And we're going to talk about a few significations of both, right? So let's dive into your horoscopes. And we're going to start with Aries rising. Let's pull up the fun chart here, shall we? Look here, here's Pluto. And I want to say really briefly, okay? Really briefly, I don't treat any of the outer planets as rulers because I mostly take the ancient perspective. I do use them, obviously, because I'm talking about Pluto. But I don't see Pluto as ruling Scorpio, so I'm not going to approach it from that angle. Just from the angle of what house he's entering for you. You see? So look, here's Pluto. And over a few days, look, 29 degrees. We're getting close, 48 minutes. Right, here we go, 57 minutes. 59, 29, 59, and boom, hours. Oh my goodness. There we go, Pluto just entered Aquarius. Oh my goodness, and conjunct the sun, isn't that fun, right? This is lovely. But let's start with our Aries rising friends. Okay, let's go to Aries rising. So for Aries rising homies, this means Pluto is entering your 11th house of hopes and friends. Yes? This brings a shattering of our hopes and our relationships. But that doesn't mean necessarily that these are going to end. But it does mean a crisis in how you relate to other people and what you want for the future, what your vision is for yourself. This shattering will bring sweeping changes, right? In how you relate to other people and your sense of optimism. It will likely make you more realistic, but also more persevering. People with natal Pluto in the 11th house tend to be quite idealistic and are incredibly dissatisfied with the status quo. They also can be a bit lonerish. Yeah. I'm a loner, Dottie. I'm a rebel. That was Pee Wee Herman. I didn't do a very good Pee Wee, but from Pee Wee's Big Adventure. But let's move on to our Taurus rising friends. So this means Pluto is entering your 10th house of career and public recognition. This brings a shattering of your reputation and life direction. This doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to lose your job or suffer a big scandal, but it will make you more aware that what you've been doing doesn't satisfy who you are anymore. You may have to face a little bit of disgrace. I rhymed. Or bad publicity. But this can challenge you to act with integrity. And what that means to me is doing what you know is right, regardless of who's watching. People with their natal Pluto in the 10th house often abuse their power or hold it over people's heads. I think of Gordon Gekko in the film Wall Street, right? He says, greed is good. I tend to disagree, but what do I know? Let's go to our Gemini rising friends. So Gemini rising, this means Pluto is entering your 9th house of beliefs. This brings a shattering of your spiritual beliefs, your politics, or your worldview. It doesn't mean that you're suddenly going to believe in nothing like me. But it will show you that you're wrong, and it will be uncomfortable. You could find yourself changing your worldview a number of times over the next 20 years. Whereas some people are very static, you will be very dynamic. So I have my natal Pluto in the 9th house, and it can make us quite dogmatic fanatics who bludgeon people with our understanding of things. This is the way it is. Listen to me. Just watch me on a daily basis and you'll understand what Pluto in the 9th house is like. Now, what about our Cancer rising friends? So for Cancer rising, my loves, this means Pluto is entering your 8th house of death and debt. This means a shattering of your psychological stability and possibly your finances as well. Now, this doesn't mean you go insane or destitute, but it does mean you are challenged on your relationship to death and trauma. You'll find yourself having to let go of things that you value in order to see what's of greater value. People with natal Pluto in the 8th house often have unpleasant psychic experiences, often involving malevolent entities, whether they really exist or not. I think of the movie The Sixth Sense. I see dead people. Right? Now he'd be all like, I see trans people. The relationship to money, too, is sort of like, easy come, easy go. Money comes in, money goes out. So, learn to budget yourself. And now we're going to move on to Leo rising. OMG. We all know that I simp for Leo rising. At least one of them in particular. And this, my dear Leo rising, means Pluto is entering your 7th house of relationships. This is a shattering of your romantic and your committed relationships. It doesn't necessarily mean breakups, although it can, but it has more to do with how you relate to your partners and the control you allow them to have over you. You'll find yourself becoming more emotionally independent, finding your power within, and making your romantic relationships a healthy addition to your life rather than another addiction. People with natal Pluto in the 7th house often get possessive, domineering, and controlling because they often look, right? They often look for their own power through connections and associations rather than from themselves. If you've ever seen Addams Family Values, the second Addams Family movie in the 90s, I think of Debbie, right? Who's trying to marry Uncle Fester, right? Remember when she finally she electrocutes or tries to electrocute them all because of the, marriage to Fester, festering marriage. She's trying to get all of this stuff, and I don't really think he had any stuff, but I don't know. I don't remember the movie, just that part. Well, anyway, let's move on to Virgo rising. Now, Virgo rising, friends, this means Pluto is entering your 6th house of obligations and illnesses. This is a shattering of your work life and your routine. It doesn't mean you have to become enemies with your coworkers, although it can. But it does mean that the way you've been living your daily life will become excruciating. You will find yourself feeling stifled, stuck, and even sick. This prompts us to burst out of the drudgery of the known and look for meaning in things once again. People with natal Pluto in the 6th house are often micromanagers and or slaves to routine or doing things in a particular way. I think of Lundberg, right, in Office Space. Like, when he gets mad, I imagine him saying, like, yeah, if you could just go to hell, that would be great, right? And bring your TPS reports with you because we're using new cover sheets on them. Anyway. What about our Libra rising homies? Libra rising, like my helper Amber. Well, Ambi, this means Pluto is entering your 5th house of children and pleasure. This represents a shattering of your fun and enjoyment life. It doesn't mean anything bad is going to happen to your kids or that you won't have fun anymore. But it does mean that you may realize how controlling you've been as a parent or undisciplined, right? Two sides of the same coin. You will find that you need to lighten up and enjoy things again, especially with your kids. If you've been too hands-off, you will find that you need to employ more discipline. But chances are it's the other way around, right? You may find you need to let go a little bit and not be so much of a helicopter. Helicopter, helicopter. I don't even know what that's from. But, I think it's a TikTok meme. So anyway, people with natal Pluto in the 5th house, though, are often controlling with their children and have high or even unreasonable expectations of them. These people can also often let pleasure become their ruin. I think of Charlie Sheen, He's just so passionate, right? He's so passionate that he has to lock a woman in his bathroom and allegedly abuse them. I mean, winning, right? Well, let's go on to Scorpio rising because that's kind of creepy. We're feeling too creepy, so we're moving to Scorpio. Am I right? Now, for Scorpio rising homies, this means Pluto is entering your 4th house of home, parents, and the past. Here we have a shattering of your home and personal life and your origin story. Yes? It doesn't mean that you're going to be homeless or sever all connections with the past or find out that you're adopted. But it can. But it does mean that your relationship to both your home and past need an upgrade, right? Put 2 Ds into that upgrade for a double dose, right? Of the, you know, anyway. You will be challenged on what home means to you. And remember, the Buddha said we must learn to be our own refuge. Thus, we have to learn to be our own home. Wherever you are, there is home. It's similar with your past or history. It doesn't define you, nor should it determine your goals or your behavior, right? Remember, Clerk's title does not dictate behavior. I'm such a movie nerd. Oh my gosh. A 90s movie nerd. People with natal Pluto in the 4th house, though, often have an abusive parent and feel like their home life is shattered early on, particularly during childhood. I think of the movie Mommy Dearest, right? It's a hard movie, but no more wire hangers! Now I'm creeped out again. Let's move on. We got Sagittarius rising. Sagittarius rising. Now this means Pluto is entering your 3rd house of communication and extended family. This is a shattering of what you know or think you know, how you speak, write, communicate, express yourself, and even in some extended family relationships. This doesn't mean you're going to lose your mind, but it does mean that you'll feel at some point that you've lost your voice. And this is a good thing, because it was probably too quiet anyway, or maybe you held stuff back, or maybe you felt insecure about your intelligence. You will likely be challenged you will be challenged to project power, though, through expression. And find confidence once again. And express that through thinking and speech. To have confidence in your thought and in the power of your mind. People with natal Pluto in the 3rd house, right? I call it the breath that blasts. Yeah. They could say very mean things and sort of be a little bit like debate bros, right? Contrarians to everything, even when they know they're wrong. They often try to control others through speech, right? They can be spreading lies or abusive language. I think of Tucker Carlson or Twitter or X or whatever. Twix? I don't know. Well, how about our Capricorn rising friends? So for Capricorn rising, this means Pluto is entering your 2nd house of money. This is a shattering of what you value and your material situation. It doesn't mean that you're going bankrupt or losing everything, but it does mean you're having massive changes in how you manage your resources. You'll probably notice yourself getting more cautious, right, with your money and your possessions. And you'll probably notice yourself getting more possessive, right, or frugal, or less inclined to share. People with natal Pluto in the 2nd house also tend to be miserly, like Scrooge McDuck, or I guess Ebenezer Scrooge, We already mentioned him. Or like a dragon hoarding her gold, right? My mom has Pluto in the 2nd house, and she would fill her purse with condiments, right? Free condiments from restaurants. And when I was a kid in school, she would tell me, don't share any of your lunch with anyone. All those kids are rich. We're not. Right? But we were pretty well off at the time. So, anyway, let's get to the next sign, which is mine. Aquarius rising. Aquarius. Aquarius. Yes. Well. Aquarius. This means Pluto is entering our 1st house of self. Dun dun dun. This is a shattering of, you. That is you, mind, body, and spirit. This doesn't mean that we're going to die, at least not physically. But it does mean that we die to what we thought we were, like a psychological death. We may have big changes physically, though. I mean, I've been transitioning the whole time Pluto's been within orb to my ascendant. But more importantly, we're challenged on our sense of self and our relationship to power. If we've misused it, we'll suffer. Simple as that. If we've been powerless or righteous with our power, then we often come to feel more powerful. It's not a comfortable process, though, by any means. We will be challenged, right? And we will have many of our attachments ripped away. But the potential reward is even greater. Please take note, especially if Pluto's going to cross your ascendant, because that'll be a pivotal time in your life. It's a once-in-a-lifetime deal. Most people don't get it. So please relish it, because it's going to make you into a dynamo. Like Jesse Ventura said in Predator, this is going to make you a sexual Tyrannosaurus. I mean, rawr. Anyway, people who have natal Pluto in the first house tend to be a bit creepy. I think of, right, the silent film Nosferatu. You know, I'm kidding, of course, but, you know, they wear Pluto on their sleeves, essentially. It oozes out of their pores. They tend to be quite intense and have a powerful presence. People often don't like them because of that presence. You know, they could walk into a room and people get like jealous and envious. Like, who does she think she is? Yeah. How dare she walk and carry herself like that? Yeah. Right. I've had fuzz in my hair this whole time, I just noticed. Oh well, it doesn't matter. It's part of having cats, you know. Let's move on to Pisces rising. Pisces rising, my Pisces loves. This means Pluto is entering your 12th house of isolation and mental health. This is a shattering of your well-being and stability. This doesn't mean you're going insane or going to prison or something like that. But it does mean that your sense of what has and hasn't been good for you will be changing. If you've had self-destructive tendencies or habits, they will become incompatible with your life direction. Sometimes this literally takes us out of toxic environments or forces us to leave an unhealthy group of friends. But more often the challenge is internal, and we have to struggle with these parts of ourselves and with desire. Either way, though, you can't escape reality. And this transit admonishes us to take responsibility for ourselves. Now, Pluto, people with natal Pluto in the 12th house can be quite self-destructive or resistant to facing reality. They can be generally pessimistic. And when you're talking to them, it's like, the end is near. Right? When I think of Pluto in the 12th house, I think of Angelina Jolie in the movie Girl Interrupted, right? Don't point your finger at crazy people. Right? It's a good movie. And she's good in it. Also, Brittany Murphy and Winona Ryder. Anyway, all my crushes, all my loves in one crazy movie. Anyway, I hope this was useful and interesting. Please like, subscribe, comment, and click the bell so that you get notified. And check out my other videos because there's loads of educational content and I'm pretty cute and fun. Consider donating to my Patreon too to help me keep making this wonderful content. All my information is below in the description. I also do the best readings. It's science. You can either book through my website, frankielynch.com, or contact me. Again, my information is below. But most importantly, I love you. You're beautiful. And have a spectacular, whatever it is you're having.